Perfect. I just let some.
All right. Hello and welcome to Beyond the Physical Summit with me, your host, Sitara. I am here with a dear friend. I'm going to start off with a little personal fact. We actually share a best friend and a best friend who is an absolute treasure and joy to know and love. And so we have been linked in such a beautiful way. I also recognize Brianna. Am I saying it right? Brianna?
Brianna, yep, or Bree.
Brianna,
Ping
okay,
pong for Bree.
beautiful.
So, yeah.
Bree, perfect. Um, I just see you as such an illuminating light, right? We come from the same hometown. I've been, noticing you from 2 degrees of separation in so many different ways. And I've always admired your creativity and your ability to come up with an idea, put it into action, and just go full speed ahead. So I'm really excited that you have been able to join us here today. And I'm so thrilled to share some of your experiences, we'll say in the digital world, the Web3, the NFTs, the crypto, and the whole shebang, as well as what you have found in community to really bring that grounded presence of that initial or that signature spark that you bring of like what the world needs. And I genuinely, I just admire because I always see you like living in your ikigai. I'm sure you're familiar with the term. We could probably go over it here for people who haven't heard it. But I'm just so thankful and so honored to have you here. Is there anything that you would like to share with us that I have left out?
Appreciate that. I would say everything is likewise. I've always admired your journey. I love that you're curious and you are well traveled and that you're constantly kind of learning from different cultures. And so I think it's, instantaneous when we really started to dig deep on a more spiritual level and a bigger why. So I equally second that. And of course, we got to shout out Tegan, the ultimate connector here. And I'm learning from her constantly. She's such a teacher of mine. And so I love that she was kind of our common thread. So.
Absolutely. I mean, my heart just starts beaming when I hear her name. She's such a joy.
Yeah.
And I hope you're gushing listening to this. All right. So can you tell us a little bit about your experiences? Let's start with like as an entrepreneur here in Reno. Where and when did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Was it young? Was it later on? How did that journey start for you?
Okay, it's so funny that you just phrased it that way because I just was actually talking to my dad. I come from 2 entrepreneurs. And actually I'm like third generation. And he just said, well, yeah, you pride yourself on such an entrepreneur. And I was like, well, I've never really like woken up in the morning and be like, you know what, I'm going to be like an entrepreneur. And so it's so funny yes, it is a title, of course, but it's more so of like, and maybe I speak for several entrepreneurs, it's like you go out and you're trying to solve something that you haven't found elsewhere. So by default, you have to create it. And I would say on the hardest of days, we actually were just catching up about that. I would love to be an employer or be employed by somebody, an employee instead of the employer. And it's, it's the hard work, but I think you fall into that if you've realized you've tried to fit in elsewhere, you've tried to create this vision elsewhere under another guise. And it's more so like, okay, like I can, and then planes are really loud. Sorry, I can maybe close the window. I should do this myself. And so by default, I would say I continually become an accidental entrepreneur. Just because, and it's not, I think maybe when I was younger on my first business, it was maybe based in ego where it's like, well, I can do this myself, right? Like, why would I go do this for somebody else? I should have all the equity. And from such this like, I don't know, more ego-driven space where I think now it's more so I want to collaborate. I want to be with others. If it does work with me doing that under, another entity, that's great. If not, then like I'll go navigate that world by myself. So so I guess that is how I sum up entrepreneurship and what it is. I guess I can go a little deeper on how I got into it. So again, I've been around that entrepreneurial spirit. My grandfather, immigrant, came over in the 60s to Reno through the steel industry. And so I've really been around that kind of hard work, especially like, his back was against the wall, not speaking in English, coming into a pretty industrial construction realm. And so I think I have that just innately in me to just, roll up your sleeves and work hard. We're both from Nevada. I think that really, rings true here. So I guess kind of note that even like little, and you always hear these stories, so cliche, but it really was true, like creating little businesses as kids or like wanting to do it on my own. It was never like, oh, I want to go be a teacher and work in a system. It was like, oh, how can I like create this company? And I employed all my friends. And it was always this idea of like imaginative versus just like being a cog in the wheel. So I think, let's see. So the big kind of unlock for me, maybe not like professionally, but I did move away at a really young age across the world, traveled. I moved to Africa, and I think that really like unlocked a lot for me. Reno's amazing. We grew up so nature-based here. That's a huge other pillar that we'll probably get into that I have as like my North Star. But I think as far as like the bigger lens of the world really unlocked when I was across, the entire globe, probably the farthest point from home, and an entirely different culture. And so that really was a lot of like, oh, okay, I can maybe do something different than what has been done in the past. So that was a big unlock. And then moved to New York right after that. And so just I've kind of always been around these extreme environments that then maybe I was trying to, it was never me, I'm going to go create a sneaker company. It was more so I'm in these environments, what holes can I fill? And then what company can I create from there? And we'll probably dive into it, but it's a myriad of different companies and not one set genre. So it's been quite the journey so far.
Yeah, I I hear you on that. And I love to hear that we have that entrepreneurial gene. I say that it's a gene. The third generation entrepreneur, I think we just, and I'm kind of assuming here, but I really do think that coming from entrepreneurial families means that you are more willing to take risk. There's just something there. And there's also something with the entrepreneurial spirit that may be learned, but also may be genetic, as like, we choose our family, that's just not taking no for an answer. It's that there's always a way, there's always an opportunity, there's always something to share and explore there. And I really want to highlight your willingness to jump on a plane and have an experience in Africa so young, because that takes a certain set of cojones. It takes a certain set of like, I'm going to break the seal.
Totally. Yeah, you're right. It is funny in retrospect. I will say real fast to piggyback on your first point. I think something that's kind of glossed over often, and it's come up more recently, is you can go play the like very corporate capitalistic route. And that where more entrepreneurs kind of get frustrated with that is when you're doing too much, when you've gone in the other lane and you're bringing in business leads, but you're supposed to be in marketing. And my wrist was constantly getting slapped when here I was just doing it innately. It wasn't trying to overachieve. It wasn't I didn't like the lane I was in. It was just like, I am doing multiple things in this, don't just stick me in this one lane. And I was getting in trouble for it. When here I was like, you would think doing more than you were expected. And so it should be like extra credit or it should be rewarded. And so that was multiple times in certain architecture firms or certain roles where I was like, okay, like, how can I can't keep getting in trouble from bringing more to the business, right? So I think that's something that you often find where people then become an accidental entrepreneur, where they can actually go and explore that, especially if it comes to like business development. But yeah, I just was saying this the other day. I don't think I could, I did just go visit Tegan out in Bali, and it was similar. I wasn't moving there, but I was going to a wedding in India and then went to Bali, and it was one of those like big, across the world trips. And here I am decades later. And it was like, oh God, this is like a big deal, where that never even crossed my mind so young. So I think your age and your ignorance and your worldview is so important, because fear, I do believe, like, can come more when you're older, as much as you hear the narrative of the opposite, where you're so fearful because you don't know. The unknown is so scary. Where like, when you're older, and now I'm like, okay, as a single female going across the world, like, you're just more cognizant of things. And so I would argue I was almost more like, not scared, but I thought more of certain scenarios on the plane this time versus 2 decades ago. And what does that look like? So probably not 2 decades ago, but close to. So it wasn't scary. It was certainly scary for my family. It was certainly scary for other people, but I was like, let's go. Like, I had no idea what I was in store for. Now, when I got over there, it was like I had a severe culture shock and like was miserable, homesick, and like crying every night because it was just so scary and different, and it was a lot. And so, but you have to I love putting myself in those like really uncomfortable situations. Even to this day, I just got out of a vision quest, which might be something we can kind of dive into. You're
Absolutely.
alone in the woods for 10 days by yourself, no food, no nothing. You're fasting, for spirit. And they call it the sledgehammer approach. It's extremely difficult, 0.00 something population of the world has done something like this. And that's the shit I love. I'm like, throw me in, like, I want to see how I'm going to react. I want to see what comes out of it. I want to test myself. And again, not from this ego point of view. Even Africa wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go, move to Africa. It's just more so like, I love living like on that edge of like, let's see what it's all like, let's see what life's all about. To the point to where I've had to confront, like, do I have an addiction with like an extreme lifestyle? Is this like something that I'm gonna have to keep up with the rest of my life? Or like, could I ever like settle and like live in a town more than, 6 months and not need constant change? And so it's been really looking in the mirror and trying to see what my relationship is with that, because I do tend to like live to the full extreme constantly. So
I relate to that in more ways than we have time to discuss here today. Fully and completely. I hear you on that. And the like propensity to get bored easily, I've had to face that. Bored easily in relationship, bored easily in monotony, bored easily in town, bored easily in community. Like there's something there for me that I've really had to confront as well. And I will say recently, like in the last couple of months and even in the last couple weeks, I've noticed something very viscerally change inside of me that is like, I used to want to get to know everybody and I used to want to make new friends, and I'm very much a social butterfly. I'm very much like social lubricant, my friends used to call me. Like I just love being out there. I'm a connector. Like it's very easy for me to get along with a wide range of people like within a matter of 5 minutes.
Yep.
And what I've started to really hone in on, and I don't know if this is maturity or maybe that I've healed that deep wound inside of me that was the like more, what's next. But I've really been desiring and yearning for lifelong friendships and those lifelong connections. Because one of the things that I've noticed has been really fun about getting older is seeing what everybody is doing with their life. And not just seeing what everyone's doing with their life, but also like picking the ones that you want close.
Yep.
And really seeing how life influences and how they influence life and moving through. And there's been a shift, and I do think it's a maturity. I do think it's a wisdom thing. But that, the desire for extremes and adrenaline and new, like I'm right there with you. But similarly, I called a come to Jesus meeting. I had to have a come to Jesus meeting with myself and really go, okay, what's sustainable here? What's working? What are my full goals? What do I want to build? And if I want to build a lifelong legacy, like I'm going to need to chill for a little bit and like really, 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 really focus and hone on foundation. And I love that because now you and I have had an opportunity to connect a little bit more in that space.
And that variety and simulation can come in other ways. And I think like that's where the maturity comes in, where you're like, oh, I needed a different city every time. I needed a different partner. I needed a different project. And you're like, it's that maturity and that shift. And you worded it so well. I'm going through that same phase. I wouldn't say the lifelong friends. Absolutely. It's been more the internal, like I'm obsessed with being alone, like more than ever right now. I think of like really going in deep on certain things, and not like the personal journey work, but just like I would rather stay at home. Literally this week I did, and I like unpacked the whole Panama Canal, the most random shit ever. And I was like, you're right, I've never really like studied like why they built the Panama Canal and how it was governance wise. Like the most fun I've had, where before it was like, let's go out, let's socialize, let's go do all these things. And so it is this really interesting shift, I would agree, of what is that? Is it maturity? Is it now like self, like, maybe we were seeking little bits and pieces of other people because we wanted that little bit of a personality for us. And now it's like, oh wait, we're whole. Like I know I'm grounded. I know exactly who I am. I'm settled, internally, energetically. And then does that, quit that kind of racing side.
Yeah, that resonates.
Yeah,
for sure.
Love it.
So I do want to hear about this vision quest. What inspired you to do it? And then what were your biggest like ahas, takeaways, or like, key moments that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think something that maybe we'll get into a little bit later too, it came from a deep part of nature connection. I think us both being from here, us both living in bigger cities, I'm still partially in New York City, and I've always just like needed this outlet to nature. And I knew that. And it wasn't just this idea of like, oh, I gotta go like, touch grass. It was like, okay, no, what is like, what's that like portal that opens when I'm in nature? Like something spiritual is there, but I never could really articulate it. And it was this perfect kind of time, I would say, intersection of my life where I don't want to say it's the quintessential like lost or searching for something, but in a way it was more so like, what's that next step on personal growth or kind of journey that I'm looking for? That's not psychedelic. Maybe a portion of it could be, but it's more so like, how do I get closer to the source? Like that big question, and whether the source is nature or the source is something even further beyond that, right? So that was my intention going out there. There was also like way more detailed intentions that I've been struggling with, like my like deep masculine energy kind of running me my whole life. I'm definitely an entrepreneur. I'm definitely, they call it like the penetrator in this work, where I force everything to happen. I think you have a lot of these qualities as well, which are incredible qualities to have. I've chosen personally everything I've done in my life. I've gone out and grabbed it. I haven't really sat back and received. And I've noticed that I need to hang that up in a lot of ways, personal, or in personal relationships, but also just I'm kind of exhausted of being that, and I want to learn how to embrace the feminine side. So this was a male focused like rite of passage Native American based journey that is from indigenous cultures. It's essentially like when you go from boy to manhood, but you lean into your feminine energy to be able to, express yourself and have emotional intelligence and being able to receive in these very like male dominant ways. So I was a little bit of an anomaly, of course, but it was kind of scratching the itch of everything I wanted to discover. And you go out in nature and you let nature, that's really all they leave you with. Like, let nature kind of be your guide, which is perfect, right? I wanted nature connection in a deeper way. I wanted to be able to have uninterrupted time with spirit in whatever that looked like. And then I wanted to kind of like bury the masculine side, at least for now. And like, pat him, her on the back, being like, thank you, you've got me where I am, but like time to hang it up. So little did I know it was like opening this crazy portal to so much that we don't even have, we can scratch the surface in this. But a lot of it is surviving out in the wilderness and kind of sacrificing your body as a vessel in which to allow spirit in and to connect deep to these kind of teachings. And then, is there this bridge of like ancient wisdom into this modern world? I see myself as kind of that messenger in a lot of ways, definitely not on the frequencies that you're on, but in my work, I build communities for people and real estate development in the actual built environment. And so, I'm dealing with modern technology all the time, and I'm integrating it into where the future is going, but it's obviously all stems from the past. And so I think this like spiritual journey was just such a great representation of what that means. Not to get in like, super crazy rabbit holes, but that was kind of the overview of what it was. And so, yeah, you don't eat any food, you are fasting, you're sacrificing yourself, you're in the woods completely by yourself, no shelter, no tent, no food, no phone, no flashlight, no nothing. Surviving in the woods, and a lot kind of comes to you when you can just get quiet like that and allow whatever your belief system is, the creator, Mother Earth, whatever, to kind of finally you receive versus just like, force my way through. So yeah, I just came out of that. I think that's also a lot of the reason that I'm reclusing and kind of processing and trying to integrate. I've done plenty of spiritual journeys, psychedelic journeys, all sorts of journeys, but this one was like next level. And so I think it'll be interesting to see kind of what comes out of it at a perfect, I would say, inflection point. And maybe it's I'm attracting it, but of society's kind of asking these questions. I think right now you can just see this like massive disconnect. I was going through it as well, of disconnected from, I would start from place. So from nature, like from what we actually come from, we are nature, but disconnected from spirit, which means disconnected from community, which means disconnected from self. And then like, look at what we're dealing with today, and even further disconnection as we start to bring in technology and artificial intelligence, right? So it's like, if we can restart that narrative, and by all means, not everybody has to go out into the woods by themselves, but just start to figure out like how truly disconnected we are from the source. Like literally in New York, I would go days without my feet even touching soil. Like everything was man-made around me, right? So it's like, how do we start to kind of weave that in simultaneously when all this new tech is being woven into? So
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I hear that. When I was in Dubai, it was like I was buying these tiny plants just to have in my house.
greenery, something.
Something,
Yeah. Right.
something.
Yep.
Um, that's so interesting. And I think on a personal level, I love speaking with you because in so many ways, it's like looking in a mirror and also seeing and hearing so many different reflections. Because that masculine shield, this is actually something I've had. This is probably my fourth conversation on this in the last 2 days around the balance of the internal masculine and the internal feminine. And especially, there's a rise of women entrepreneurs. There's a rise of women in the workplace, we'll say. We've been seeing this all over. I believe, or I attribute it to the rise of the divine feminine and also the rise of the divine masculine in women as well, that are feeling more purpose driven and finding more of that fulfillment, not necessarily by being a housewife, but by seeing the option of being a divine creator. When I'm just going to kind of go into a little bit of a teachable here, that for women, because we have a womb space and because we can create life inside of our body, when that energy is not being used to create a human being or a child, that energy starts to loop. And if that energy is looping, it can loop into a partner. We can literally be like a good luck charm. I don't know if you've seen that. I've seen like, oh my gosh, I'm like, what is happening with my partner over here? And there's all this like interesting energy looping. But when I start connecting into that divine feminine of my own creativity in my own business, and I'm very curious, just on a personal level, if this is true or if it resonates for you or hearing your perspective. But when I'm in that mode, I don't even like really think about having a family. And I am at a point in my own life where that biological clock is like getting a little bit louder. I'm like, okay, I feel like I should maybe pay attention to this. But when I'm in the creation mode of my purpose and what I believe I'm here to do and be on the leading edge of like what's going on in the world and caring so much about all this stuff, I find it really hard to kind of find that balance of feeling like there needs to be an either or how can it be an and both. And so I find myself on that bridge quite often recently and lately. So if you're comfortable with sharing a little bit about that, I'd love to hear. And what is that experience for you?
I love that. No, yeah, oh God, it's prevalent metabolically, energetically, a whole 9 yards. It has been for a while and it ebbs and flows for sure. Our bodies are designed that way. I haven't heard it worded that way, that like when we're supposed to be creating something right now, like at our age, our bodies are supposed to be creating something right now. And so, is it more of this era of like, we're creating in this phase? And I wonder if it'd be less energetically when we're older, when, we won't have the same spark, not just energy wise, but just like as our body are supposed to be creating in the womb.
Biologically, it's
Exactly.
like it's there for sure.
Totally. And I do treat that. I was just telling you, I'm having like my first exit or being able to sell my first business. And I was just referring to it as my baby. And it was like the first like labor, like it was very intense, well past.
It's a birth canal. It
Yeah,
is a birth
right.
canal. To birth something into the
Yeah.
world is a
Yeah.
whole gestation experience.
Totally. And then
Completely.
you nurture it. And then you have to like, essentially like, I feel like I'm sending it off to college or handing it off. And it's like, yeah, that's a whole thing. And so I've been able to, as we see our friends and they've birthed these other things, these human lives, I'm like, yeah, I've gone through that journey and I feel this very like motherly instinct in a lot of ways, but maybe not to like a physical, life form. And I think I look at it more pragmatically, especially as of late, that like, yes, I would love a larger family. I do get the yearning to be mother in that nurturing sense, in a physical way. I feel like I nurture in a lot of these other things, like we were saying.
Yeah.
But I look at like, would I even be able to do that with how much I'm nurturing other things? And what does that look like? Like there's only so many hours a day. I don't want to give like the, CDE version of me. I would want to give my kids the AB version of me. And so how do I do that? And what would spark joy? I know it sounds pretty selfish, but like what would truly spark joy? And I love what I'm doing right now. And so unfortunately, maybe fortunately or unfortunately, like we're designed with this window and it's a real thing. And so we have to make a decision as women, and it sucks. But I think I'm trying, and this is a new thing in the past year, I'm trying not to control that. I think I'm trying not to control a lot of things right now, but I give up control in so many areas of my life, like we were saying. But I think the one thing I for sure want to not control, whether it is in vitro or whether it is, freezing eggs, or whether it is forcing myself to have relationships right now because of my window, it's like, that's like the last thing I want to force, like, let that be this organic thing.
Yeah.
Because I love so much what I'm working on right now. And by the way, they all can happen. I have incredible women in my life that can do both, and they're amazing superheroes. And I'm like, I hope I can do it like that someday, if and when that time comes. But it is a real thing. And I think like we don't get to talk in a vulnerable state often enough about like our bodies are telling us to have children right now. Like when we wake up, like that's what's happening. If you can channel that into a way of creating in other ways, I think you've really unlocked something. And I think it's a gift. Men don't think that way. I work with all men. Literally everything I do is with all men. And so it's been really interesting to kind of watch how their mind attacks certain things, where I can lean into the masculine side as far as like my work ethic and the way I see the world, but my body biologically is still is a female and very female based. And so, and emotionally based, and how I would come to the same decision, but in a weird, different way than they would. And it's really interesting to kind of like dissect the two different sexes and minds. And then as you add in like this motherly component, it's a real thing. And I don't see that changing as much as technology comes in. I don't know if we're gonna be able to like prolong the life for us, we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that all resonates for me. And it's been, and the pandemic really threw a monkey wrench in like my own prime years, where like in my mind in my 20s, I'm like, oh, that's when it'll happen. And then like, boom, like what?
It's so true. I know.
Yeah. And so it's been a really interesting thing. But I know, like, I really have noticed with the ebb and flow. I feel the desire to be a mother. I feel a desire to step into that role. I was a hard no until I was probably about 30 or 31, was just like, that's not something that's going to be around. And then things changed. And I think I went through some healing that opened that door. But similarly, that urge quiets, like I said, when I'm nurturing my clients, because there's so much of that divine mother that I was born with, and you probably too, but that divine nurturing energy, it's always like, kids have always wanted to sit next to me, people's animals want to sit next to me.
I have that too. That's funny. I've never been able to put it in those contexts. It's crazy, the attraction of that. And that's great. That's funny. Yeah.
It is. It's that divine motherly energy that we embody. And so for me, it gets satisfied in so many different ways. Yeah. And so I don't often feel there's a void, but because of, watching friends and family my age, and their kids are like going into 4th grade, I'm like, are we good? Like, is this like, are we good, or is it a thing? So again, like you're saying, I don't think we have enough room and space to talk about it in a vulnerable way as female entrepreneurs that are very mission driven and really want both. But because of the role that we play and our makeup, there is kind of a split where there's a feeling of having to choose and wanting to choose and be good at both. And I do admire the women who've been able to do both. And I do admire the women who have been able to just full blown be stay-at-home moms and nurture their family. Like, I admire all of it. And so I think it's just been something that's active. So I appreciate you going there with me in this conversation. And I hope it resonates with some that are listening. I love that. Inclusive, but it feels good to air it out a little bit.
Something that needs to be talked more often, and even in perspectives of men, like they don't really understand that that's on our mind constantly. And when we choose a next career path, like that means that the risk of then not, delaying the children even more, and not choosing the idea of motherhood. And it's just like, they don't think that we constantly have this fork in the road, and it's a lot. I will say something, go ahead.
I was going to say it is. And one of the other things that I think is interesting to add to this is, with the rise of like gender equality in the workplace, right? Equal pay and all this stuff. The other thing that's really interesting to consider is that the woman obviously takes far more risk. And so the woman in choosing the partner for this, and I've seen this kind of in conversations and it really got my wheels turning, is that the woman in choosing the partner to be able to hold, yes, still as a provider and still as that masculine container and still in that way, it is like you're saying, the ultimate surrender as a female mission driven human being, to surrender that fully and completely and to go into the feminine, to birth a human being into reality. And the courage that that takes to be able to do, because the safety of the masculine shield that feels so comfortable for us, it's like it's a completely different state of surrender that I would even find a hard time articulating, because of the depth of what that is. And where I think men take that a little bit more laissez-faire and even their role in that, but like the level of trust that it takes for a woman to step into that role and say, like, I'm ready to surrender everything if need be to go into this role, and also trust that you are going to be the one that is providing and taking care of the family rather than trying to pick up. Because I think women that develop this strong masculine shield have had to pick themselves up by the bootstraps over and over and over and over again in life. And we learn to be very self-dependent and very independent, and to take those walls or soften those walls down, it does take a lot. It really does take a lot. And it takes a very strong, very clear, balanced, honest man, transparent man, to be able to like soften in that way. And I do think there's a lot of healing just in society today and what that actually means.
Yep. You said it so well. Totally. To be able to feel where you can trust that, like, and sometimes it's not even like in the relationship wise, it's just like anybody. Like this happened the other day on a project where like, oh, like you got to trust that they have a better decision than you. And like this idea that like, again, not having control and being delighted when things surprise me is so rare. And so it's like, okay, leaning more into that, being like, oh wait, I can back away. Like I'm going to trust that. And if it doesn't work out, then you figure it out. But just being able to not forcefully, trudge through. And so you're right, that surrendering totally takes trust in a lot of ways.
So many ways.
I'm turning my camera off real fast as I get a charger, but I'm going to be right back on. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. All right, beautiful. Welcome back. Little intermission that nobody here knows about. So thank you so much just for all of this. I love the depth that we have gone to here. And I want to hear about what is inspiring you most right now, and what is it that you are focusing your energy on creating? Because you've mentioned a few times here how much you love it. I'm really excited to hear what that is.
Love it. Yes. I kind of high level, like philosophically, I think I'm really like getting called to answer more of like, what is community? I think it's such a buzzword right now. In a more pragmatic way, I do real estate development. I help, large scale real estate development projects and kind of more future city, but mixed use and residential projects come to life. And of course, like, they want the buzzword now is like the live, work, play. And what is the marketing package? We're gonna get people to move here. It's not just heads to beds. And I come from such a deep place of like when I'm in community, when I find a sense of belonging, whether it is at Burning Man, whether it is in your prayer circles and your ceremonies, or we just, when you're in community. And so I've had a really hard time when it's just this thing slapped on top of like, we are our community, or you saw it so much in the Web3 world of like, I want to find my community. And so I think I'm just really feeling called to like dissect that and like, how do we actually, what does community mean? And maybe it is the recipe book if you were to go build community, like what are your pillars, but more so of like, what are we, like, what is a revillaging that's happening? Like, what are we searching for? And so that's more high level. And then the more pragmatic way is doing that through these more future city projects. I think we're not to get like super boring, but like there's a huge housing crisis in this country. Interest rates are absolutely horrible. Construction's through the roof. You can't do any project through debt. Like there's just a lot of these like hurdles right now. And so if we can take a step back and think more creatively, like that's the cusp I really like to kind of work on. Is I would say maybe like a self-proclaimed like futurist. I like to kind of think of like, okay, how could we go back to first principles and really think this differently? So I'm working a lot with like modular builders right now, modular housing, to speed up construction and not really rely on, stick build, But then I'm also doing a lot more like of the larger master plan of like not just doing a typical sprawl workforce housing community. Like, what are we actually all looking for in this world of like rapid technology? Like, what is the sense of place? Where do we live? What do our communities look like? So
Mhm.
that's what I'm currently doing for different clients across the country right now. And then out of that, I have realized there's this deep need for, I guess, a community or a collective that's really curious on building the future. And I was just finding myself organically in a lot of these conversations, whether it was with contractors, whether it was with modular building companies, whether it was with the financing side, and everybody was just trying to figure out this like intersection of the future, especially as we get into Web3 and decentralized ownership, and we get into AI and a myriad of different kind of new technologies that are rolling in. And what does that mean for the built environment? So I started this group called Builders, and it's just for builders of the future. I've kept it very niche. You need to be working in the built environment in some way. Someone asked me like, well, I'm doing music and music's part of lifestyle and it's the future of music. I'm like, I get where you're going with that, but no, it's for people that are actually building the physical world. So it's really just kind of a side fun thing that I believe there's a lot of unicorns out there that are asking the same question that we're talking about. And they're coming at it from maybe the portrayal of like a dystopian future. And I believe in this like very much so utopian version if we can collectively work together. And so I created Builders, which is just kind of this network that brings in a myriad of projects. So it's fun. And, I'm third generation entrepreneurship, but in construction, I believe in tech, but I also get the reward from like seeing the physical thing from like 2-dimensional plan to 3-dimensional touch and feel. So I think that I'd really like to work in that realm. Now, of course, all the ephemeral things we were saying, programming, placemaking, sense of community, the energy that comes from place is non-tangible, and so is tech. And so there's ways that you can weave that kind of that bridge between digital and physical world. So I think that sweet spot is only going to get more and more interesting in the next few years as technology just continues to explode.
Yeah, and as people look for different housing options and what is available and what can I agree that it's like there's a reconnection back to ancient roots and tribal societies, and not that it needs to be like that extreme that it's villages, but even book clubs and people that are coming together for specific reasons because they want to have that kind of unification in the way that was just blasted through what I lovingly call the panini. But there's so much there for us in looking back to some of the ancient roots and also seeing how can we reconnect in a different way that serves humanity and that serves our individual communities in a really brilliant way. And that is one of the things that I do like about the digital revolution and the communities that are around Web3 is the massively collaborative nature.
Yep.
Massively collaborative. There's not in anybody that I met in that area that I felt really in competition. Yeah, maybe there was some ego and some flashy and some like, whatever. But ultimately, it was like, how can I get you connected to this person to get you connected to this person? And there was like no holding back, no gatekeeping. And I think that, yeah, there's a lot to be said in that kind of connection and how we are associating with each other. I want to say there are actually 2 guests that we had on here that are building some really, really powerful designs architecturally. And we interviewed them here, I think when they were in Romania. They were just in Turkey. They were building some spaces in Mexico. I met them when I was in Bali. Obviously, I'd love to link you guys and, cross-reference these conversations.
The next talk we're doing is the intersection of AI and architecture and how does that really going to dictate. So I think that could be really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're also talking about taking people's vocal tones and creating a sound frequency, putting that in the base foundation of the building so that as a person walks in, it's their like sound harmonics that immediately starts to attune their physical body as they're in the field and in the space.
Love that.
Like their team, I'm sure, I mean, they just shared a couple with me, but even then I was like, okay, like
Yeah, next level.
clearly something really important is happening here. So that is really exciting. I'm really happy to connect you to well, you three, they're a couple.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, anyone who is here listening right now, go and find Brianna. You can find her Instagram and LinkedIn in the description below. I just little personal plug here. I have repeatedly told her that she is one of my favorite people to follow on Instagram, and I mean it. Do it. Her life is an adventure. It's so much fun to witness. Now it's so much fun to be a part of and to, just see how this unfolds for us in so many beautiful ways. I love that we share a hometown. I feel honored in that way, and a best friend. It's just so beautiful. This life is so incredible. So is there any closing thing? Is there any last thing that you feel a ping to share with us before we close out the conversation?
I mean, gosh, we covered a lot. I would just say, like, if we were to go down the wave of like, future and where we're headed, I think just like the majority you're going to hear is so scary and dystopian, and that we will not be able to forge anything and do anything ourselves. And I just like, I would love to counter that. And I think it's more than ever that we can actually dictate where this goes. And it's actually going to turn even more human-like because we'll have these tools to do the things that we maybe spend so much time doing right now that we don't want to do with. And AI, I think, is a huge contributor. So I think like leaning in with the positive, that I really think we can build this utopian better than we can imagine with these tools. And it's not a technical shift, it's a cultural shift. And like we can come together and kind of figure that out as humans with beating hearts and brains. And I think that's just a really strong message that I continually try to have, even in the most tech-oriented rooms, that it's still human at the foundation. And what does that look like? So I super appreciate you doing this. I love it. It sounds like I want to listen to all of the other ones. They all sound amazing. You attract just like such awesome energy. And so it's a huge testament to you and what you believe in. And I just super appreciate you including me.
It is truly my honor. It truly, truly is. And to what you're speaking to, I'd say from my perspective in my lane, the vocabulary that we would use is anchoring the heaven on earth reality. And as we anchor the heaven on earth energy, the heaven on earth reality, it's like, obviously we need people and we need communities to be able to build that and not just envision, but to anchor that into this place. So thank you infinitely for the work that you're doing, your vision, and all of it. Again, check the links in the description. Stay connected with Brianna. You'll see so much magic. I can attest for the last, I don't even know how many years, but it has been an absolute joy to witness your expansion. And we'll just see how this all unfolds. Again, thank you. Thank you. And for those of you that are tuning in, I look forward to seeing you on the next interview. Mwah! Ciao, ciao.